And we are recording. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess, creator of Palmpress, and this is a series about what the experience has been like creating a physical product and building a business around it. If you have no idea what the Palmpress coffee press looks like, check out www.palmpress.coffee. And I hope you'll be extremely impressed with it. So I'm here with Dean of techHouse Design. Hi, Dean.
Hey, Jess.
We talk all the time, but thank you for joining today too. Dean is an excellent product designer who not only designed Palmpress for manufacturing, but a million other products as well. So I'm excited to let you get a sneak peek into how that process works, especially as it relates to Palmpress, and maybe we'll get some other stories as well in future episodes. So what can you expect in these episodes? This is definitely not a how-to. It's more of, for me, it's like a how it went. This whole thing. So Palmpress is my very first venture like this. I only have my stories and my mistakes to share, and they may not always be best practice, but I still hope you find something interesting or insightful in each episode. So Dean, I've actually started collecting some questions that I just sent out a few texts and said, what questions would people have when it comes to starting something like this? And I loved it. I got everything back from, I'm looking at my phone. How do you know how much inventory you'll need? How do you know how much money it will take? How do you make sure people will like your product? So I'm so excited to reflect on all these types of questions. I have a whole list beyond that. And the first one we'll start out with today is, how do you find a designer to build your prototype? Was one of the questions. And that ties in nicely as a first episode of just how this whole thing got started to begin with, and then how I found Dean, who's been there since the very, 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 very early days. So I think I'll just kind of jump into how it got started, and let's go from there. I was your everyday coffee drinker who enjoyed going to specialty coffee shops, and we all know over the past 5 years, past 10 years, coffee has evolved a lot, from the quality of the coffee that we drink, the types of coffee shops we go to, the types of coffee makers we use. So a few years ago, I got into hand brewing. I don't cook, but making my own coffee was something I was very willing to do, and it made all the difference. So I used French presses, things like that. And at one point, I was using this coffee press that I loved. It made the coffee that came out of it that I made, I was so impressed with. It was the AeroPress. The only thing about it was that I was brewing really hot coffee in a plastic brewer every day. So I just knew it was something I wanted to move away from, and something with safer materials. I really couldn't find that alternative in terms of this smaller hand brewer, something with safer materials that contacted the coffee, something where there was no waste, no pods, no paper filters, something more design forward, things like that. And after a whole bout of customer discovery and sort of seeing if there was an opportunity out there, I began sketching a concept. So just drawing, what could a physical embodiment be like of a coffee brewer that had all these qualities that I was looking for. And then I made initial very scrappy prototypes where you just use everyday materials that you have to assemble some concept and try to test it. So I created the first version of a palm press with a paper basket filter, a rubber band, a mason jar ring, a little silicone kids cup, and I was able to make really, really delicious coffee out of it. The user experience was awful, obviously, but that was the first test. Can there be this compressible coffee maker experience? So after that, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't have a background in manufacturing or product design, not professionally. So what I did was just chip away at it day to day, I became a master at Googling things. I knew that 3D printing was a thing. So I Googled 3D printing companies, and there was one in Seattle, which felt very appropriate from a coffee standpoint. And they said, we're glad to 3D print something for you. We just need, you need the file for us to print to begin with. And I asked if they could connect me with someone that could create that file. So they connected me with an industrial designer that came up with some concepts, got it 3D printed. It was awesome, but it was more so the visual form factor that he was able to put together. Not so much like a functioning mechanism to make the coffee. So while working with the industrial designer, he took it as far as he could go. And at one point he sent me this Kickstarter campaign that he thought was interesting because the product, you know, reminded him of, you know, the concept that we were going for, but in sort of a different space. And at the bottom of this Kickstarter campaign, they thanked someone named Dean for helping them out. And so I probably Googled you, Dean, found your number, gave you a call, and you picked up. And I was really happy about that. And we had a good conversation. And
yeah, that would have been the Stojo. I think
yes,
anybody wants to look at that. I don't actually have one around here.
a collapsible.
Bring one next week for everybody to see.
Yeah, sounds good.
But yeah, it's a collapsible coffee cup. Which kind of did some of the things that you were interested in doing.
With silicone.
With silicone.
Yeah.
Which I think, you know, with the first model that you made, we would call it, like, in this sort of like design world that I kind of work in sometimes, I think we'd call that like a Frankenstein model. So you go out and you buy a bunch of stuff that maybe you can find in a hardware store or bits and pieces from other products, and you put them together to kind of make a product that does what you want to do.
Right.
It's kind of the cheapest, fastest way to just like see if you can make a thing, do a thing. Maybe it's not pretty, but it starts to like, is it worth doing? Is there actually some there to pursue as a product? And I think you actually used yours, right?
Yeah, it was definitely, you had to handle it very gingerly. You mean but it did the job. And I think the initial prototypes and then the ones that we ended up making, and I want to do an episode where we deep dive further into, you know, the iterations we did and what our different prototypes look like. But the ones we did, yeah, each time it kind of, if you can't address everything at once, because, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of open questions. I think each of our prototypes sort of aim to, you know, answer a couple of the 20 questions that we had. And each one worked better and better. Each one was easier to show someone else without having to explain so much, because it was taking more shape and function. So, but yeah, they each worked. It was initially, again, like you kind of have to handhold like a user tester throughout the process, but later on it became just more and more intuitive. Which was great.
And like, I think we see this in the process pretty commonly, where different prototypes sort of address different things. We have prototypes called works like prototypes, where it just kind of works like the final product you imagine it to, but maybe doesn't look like. That's what yours would have, but more of a works like, kind of captures the brewing style that you wanted and the materials that you hope to use, and certainly have the flavor of coffee that you were hoping to get at the end. And the work that you came out of your first designer with, you know, we sort of that it looks like.
Yes.
Start to look like the product you're hoping for. I think more importantly, it captured the experience that you wanted the end user to have, which is a thing that we can imagine without knowing how to make. We can say, like, you know, which is where you're at. I want an immersion brewer that only uses stainless steel and silicone, no paper filters, more food safe. I want the experience to be add some coffee, add some hot water, screw it together, put it over a cup. You know, then our job becomes how do we do that?
How does it become a real thing that you can not only make one of, a one-off version, but you can build for a manufacturer to make it again and again. So that's what I think it opened my eyes from a total outsider to this process when we started working together. You know, you said DFM, design for manufacturing, and it's a totally different thing to be able to make one of something, and then you realize you know, maybe how a particular part was designed, it's not as easy to create it so that a mold can keep, you know,
Yeah.
consistently or something like that. So that was really fascinating.
I think that, like, I think you start to realize there's a lot of stakeholders in the process, rather than like just that are first you imagine you're the only stakeholder. I just want better coffee. Then maybe you start to imagine a customer. Oh, you know, do other people actually want this thing that I want? And then there's like all these invisible people that you don't know are even there yet. Your mold maker, your factory, your box maker,
Right.
your shipping company,
The shipping.
your wholesale distributor. All of these people have unique needs, all the way down to like certain types of customers, ones that maybe care more about cleanability than other things. And each one of these has like little needs that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like prioritizing features. If not everything can be number one, because we did have to make some strategic decisions on, honestly, if we can't have all these things be, you know, for instance, if you're trying to make something that is eco-friendly, no waste, and completely reusable, disposability offers people a lot of convenience. You use something once, you throw it away, right? So it wouldn't make as much sense for us to say convenience and disposability, or, you know, like the absolute speed is a must-have, because you just know that for us, our value is to be willing to take a bit more time to build something that was reusable, not disposable. So it's things like that to be clear about.
And interesting you bring the word value up, because, and you know, I know you have a list of what you want these shows to be. I'm going to throw it out there that brand values and brand is something that you could talk for 10 minutes about, no problem. Mm-hmm. And that the way we prioritize this list of features ends up being a reflection of our brand values. Had our brand valued cost over all else, I think the product would have come out a little differently, if not a lot differently, just to make the most affordable product ever. And I don't think that was our goal. I think, you know, on our list of brand values was food safety, food, I think predominantly, right? Hot, and you said this at the opening, hot water and plastic, undesirable.
Contact, right? Yeah, that, and what else was there? I think between that and the reusability, but also packaging it up in a way that's beautiful, I think that's obviously a challenge. Usually form and factor sometimes compete, or things become too big because you're, you know.
Mm-hmm. The coffee space is so technical too, that I think things tend to polarize either on the very beautiful in design size, and maybe they don't function or do a lot, or like the very feature science fiction function driven stuff with lots of knobs and hard corners. And there's I think Palmpress strikes a balance there in an attempt to be unintimidating to people, but still make good coffee.
Yeah, definitely what we aimed for, because we're trying to attack it on multiple sides. And I'm very happy with how it came out. So it worked. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Dean, what, in terms of, okay, so the question was, how do you find a designer for your product? We sort of talked about this anecdote of how I found you. And then in general, after in that first meeting, how prepared or how far along, or what do you prefer that the project person has a certain amount of things to present to you? Does anything make your life easier, or you're fine to jump in at any point?
Well, like all products are going to follow a similar arc.
Mm.
Um, from that first inspiration to selling a thing on
Yes.
Amazon or direct to consumer, where have you. Um, where different people are during that arc will change. So I mean, I know where I like to come in,
Okay.
but it doesn't change the arc at all.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think fundamentally, because I work in products a lot, I don't want, and I have less interest in getting involved in projects that maybe haven't been thought through the whole way, or um, they're like more inspiration than anything else. Hey, I've got a great idea. Oh, the people are going to love this idea. Like, yeah, there's a lot of ideas out there. How do you know people are going to love it? So, and you and I both are great believers in the sort of design thinking process.
I
And
love
that's a
customer
process of both
discovery.
discovery and validation.
Mhm.
And I think people love discovery, they're not so keen on validation, because they stand the chance of being wrong. And people then are more focused on their solution rather than the problem they're trying to solve if they're unwilling to be wrong in the validation process. And I think you need to be really open-minded and like kind of embrace the idea that you found a good problem to solve, but maybe your solution isn't the best one.
Mhm.
So let's give it a good shake. Let's really see if this is worth pursuing. And that mindset alone kind of like tends to topple all the dominoes along the way. And
Yeah.
if you can get the first one, you've got them all in some respects. And some people can't get past that first thing that, hey, my idea is so great. Um, so I like to see people who have closed the loop on their ideas,
Right.
and to the point that one, and again, I think in these podcasts as they were, we're going to be rehashing a lot of the themes that we talk about all the
For
time.
sure. Yeah.
And one of them, you're going to hear here for the first time, everybody, is feasibility, viability, and desirability, which I think comes from the IDEO process of
Mm.
looking for innovation, and there's really something to it. Because at the end of the day, we get into business to make money. We make money through profit on selling a thing. Uh, so in order
Yeah.
to sell the thing, there it is, the desirability, the feasibility, and the viability. And if you haven't thought all of that through, then I probably don't want to get into the mess of product development, because it really is a mess, and it's not always worth going through it. So we're really gonna like roll up our sleeves and start hacking away.
Right.
There better be, and I hope, a channel, a way, something to do with this product, and some evidence that it's worth digging in the first place.
Yeah, and to your point about considering those three points of, a good innovation, feasibility, viability, and desirability, it's not that you have to have all the answers answered. It's just you have to be, you have to understand that that's a framework that's very important, and recognize that you have a lot of open questions, recognize that there are a lot of things that you need to test. Is that fair to say? Like, right, when a project starts out, you may not know exactly, what the quote on something is going to be, but just understanding that those are all the pieces that you need to
Yeah, you have
work.
to have a very comfortable relationship with ambiguity, because
Yeah.
the best we can know is about how much it's going to cost, about this much. It's going to look a little bit something like this.
Right.
But like, it is a process of ranging and refinement and iteration
Yes.
as the thoughts, crystallize over time. But like, there's no such thing as like coming out of the box hot with that golden solution
Yeah.
to like solve everything. It's just, I've never found that to actually exist.
Mhm.
Come across that entrepreneur, invest all of your money in them because they truly are the unicorn.
I think those are great points to leave with. We kind of, again, told you how this whole thing got started, how I found Dean, how to find a designer. Again, it was definitely a very organic, one thing led to another, but sometimes that's what it is when there's not as much of a playbook in this type of business. I think that's just sort of what you do, right? You just, day after day, if you're putting something else out there and moving the needle on something, obviously it's natural that more people will naturally be exposed to it because you're reaching out to people and getting referrals and things like that. And I think, what else? I don't know. I think
Well,
that's,
I mean,
yeah.
as long as if people are interested, I'll just throw it out there. There's a couple of there are places to look for the designers.
Yes, please.
Is on my website, of course, techhousedesignstudio.com.
techhousedesignstudio.com.
Yes. Or is it Tech House Design? No, there's no studio. It's just techhousedesign.com. We'll put it in the edit.
techhousedesign.com.
And, but more importantly, Coroflot is a really great place.
Okay.
477. Behance, of course, awesome places where designers will put up their portfolios for
Really
people to
great. Okay.
browse through. But also people need to be aware of what they need, what stage they are in the development process, and talking to somebody who's got who can appreciate the full process all the way into manufacturing. If you really are interested in making a piece of hardware, an actual physical product, talk to somebody who's actually done it. Find a friend who's been the whole way through, which I think you did as well.
I will emphasize that because I couldn't imagine if, I were working with a designer that gave me we ended up creating this beautiful prototype that checked the boxes that we prioritized. And then at the end of the day, let's say they didn't know how to rejig it for manufacturing. If I went to a manufacturer and they just said this, certain parts wouldn't work or this and that for the budget that we have. And I agree, you really want to know someone that, or work with someone that can work with the manufacturer in that way and ideally has a lot of experience under their belt. So Dean has been in, among other things, housewares for, and develop those contacts and expertise in that space. So, and Palmpress is a tabletop, it's a kitchen product. And that helps a lot because when it came time to find a manufacturer, I wasn't going in blind and knocking on doors and not being sure how to vet people. I already had that network thanks to Dean. And it's these things that maybe when you're initially talking to a designer, you may not know to ask, but it's, just thinking, like you said, Dean, like thinking the process through, and it'll make your life so much easier the less handoffs that you have, in my opinion, if you're trying to find someone that can really stick with the project the full way.
It's good advice.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dean, very, very much. If you're listening and have any other questions that you think would be interesting for us to talk about, or even just feedback, please email me at jess@palmpress.coffee, and my email is on the website as well. And we'll see you next time. See you next time.